The galaxy was watching, and for the first time, humanity was about to step into a war it had long ignored. Across countless star systems, civilizations had been trembling under the shadow of the fourth call. They were a species built for destruction, quick to conquer, and faster to erase anyone who stood in their way. Entire colonies vanished without warning. Planets that once thrived with life became nothing more than cold, dark orbs floating in empty space. And still, humanity had stayed quiet. For centuries, Earth had observed the wider galaxy with caution. Humans had always been clever, adaptable, and surprisingly patient. They knew that rushing into conflicts beyond their reach could bring disaster. Instead, humans focused on themselves, on building their technology, refining their strategies, and understanding the universe. They had avoided galactic politics, ignored alliances, and left the so-called guardians of peace to handle the threats that now terrified. Countless civilizations dot, but the calm of observation could not last forever. Reports started arriving from the outer systems, stories too horrifying to ignore. Refugee fleets from dozens of worlds described entire cities being wiped out in the blink of an eye. One account spoke of a planet where the fourth call had landed in the middle of the night. By dawn, not a single building remained standing. Not a single life survived. Ships carrying families, merchants, scientists, and even children were torn apart without a trace. The galaxy was shaken. Leaders of powerful civilizations began sending urgent messages to Earth, asking humanity to intervene, hoping that the species that had long avoided the spotlight could finally stop this nightmare. But humans were not interested in rushing to save others for glory or recognition. Their sense of justice and understanding of the universe was quiet, methodical, and precise. They did not panic at the news. They did not shout or demand vengeance. They watched, they calculated, and they prepared. When the first refugee convoy was destroyed, an entire fleet carrying women, children, and the elderly from 3 different star systems, the decision was made. The message from Earth was clear and cold. Humanity would intervene, not because they wanted war, but because they would not allow a species to continue terrorizing the innocent. What surprised the galaxy was not the decision itself, but the way humans acted. When humans decided to intervene, they did it with a calm efficiency that made observers stop and take note. There was no show of force, no threats, no speeches broadcast across star systems. Just ships leaving Earth's orbit in formation, hundreds of them moving like a single living organism. Each vessel carried weapons and technology the galaxy had never seen. But it was not the weapons that caused all. It was the humans themselves, their composure, their focus, their undeniable sense that they were not here to negotiate or plead. They were here to stop a threat, and nothing else mattered. Observers from other civilizations were watching every move. Their instruments recorded human ships traveling through the warp lanes with unmatched precision. They noted how the humans avoided obstacles that would have destroyed even the fastest alien fleets. They saw humans communicating not with loud signals or overwhelming force, but with coordination so perfect it seemed almost like they could read each other's minds. And all the while, humans never hesitated, even in the face of the fourth call, who had made a reputation of being brutal, cunning, and unpredictable. Humans moved with confidence. The first contact occurred at the edge of a system that had already been marked for destruction. Scouts from human fleets observed the fourth call forces as they prepared to bombard a planet. The alien ships were massive, built for war, and armed with weapons designed to annihilate. Yet the humans did not fire immediately. Instead, they deployed small, precise drones to gather intelligence, mapping the enemy's every move. Every calculation was made in real time. Every strategy was considered. Then, when the humans made their move, the galaxy watched in awe. Humans did not attack the way other species had learned to fight. They did not fire massive beams or launch endless barrages of missiles. Instead, their weapons worked in ways that defied expectation. Alien ships were removed from sight almost instantly, disappearing as though they had never existed. Observers could hardly believe their eyes. The Vorthkal ships, which had destroyed countless colonies, vanished in moments. There was no explosion, no debris, no fire. Just absence. Even from a distance, the effect was terrifying. Entire fleets that had once seemed invincible were gone before they could respond. The Vorthkal soldiers scrambled, trying to understand what was happening, but it was too late. Human strategy was not just about firepower. It was about thinking faster, adapting faster, and acting with precision no other species could match. And yet, humans were not cruel. They did not kill for pleasure, and they did not destroy without reason. Their goal was clear: stop the threat and protect those who could not defend themselves. Every move was deliberate. Every strike had purpose. The galaxy could see it, even from light years away. Humanity was not acting out of revenge or aggression. Humanity was acting out of necessity, and in that necessity lay a terrifying brilliance that even the most advanced civilizations could not fully comprehend. Meanwhile, on the planets that had watched the Vorthkal invade, hope began to return. Refugees who had lost everything now had reason to believe they might survive. Messages started reaching the outer systems, carried by sensors and scouts, describing human ships moving with unstoppable determination. Every transmission carried the same astonished tone. The humans were here, and the enemy was falling apart. For the first time, the Vorthkal realized that they had underestimated a species they had barely noticed for centuries. Earth had been quiet, yes, but humans were not weak. They were not naive. They had been preparing, learning, and waiting for the moment when they would need to act. And now, that moment had come. Observers across the galaxy could not stop talking about what they were seeing. They recorded every movement, analyzed every tactic, and shared every discovery with others. No one had ever seen such efficiency, such intelligence, such calm under pressure. The humans were not just fighting, they were rewriting the rules of engagement. And the Vorthkal, who had thought themselves unstoppable, were beginning to panic. Even as the humans advanced deeper into the Warzone, they maintained their humanity. They were not cold machines. They helped refugees when they could, provided assistance to those in need, and acted with a moral clarity that seemed almost alien to the other civilizations. Every move, every strike, every decision carried weight. Humans were proving that strength was not just in weapons or ships. It was in the mind, the strategy, and the unwavering commitment to protect life wherever it could. By the time the first wave of human intervention had ended, the Vorthkal were stunned. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for decades were gone. Entire squadrons vanished without a trace. The survivors retreated, confused and shaken. And the galaxy, which had watched silently for so long, realized something important. Humanity had entered the Warzone not with fire and anger, but with purpose, and the results were absolute. From that point forward, the story of humans entering the Warzone spread across star systems. It was told by survivors, observed by allies, and recorded by distant civilizations. The galaxy had learned that humans were not just another species. They were a force unlike any other, capable of ending wars in ways no one could have imagined. And for humanity, this was only the beginning, because the calm, deliberate, and unstoppable entry into the Warzone was just the first part of what would become a history no other species could ignore. The galaxy had watched. The galaxy had learned. And the Vorthkal, who had once believed themselves invincible, had begun to understand that underestimating humans was the gravest mistake they could make. Humanity had made its choice. The first wave into the Warzone had already stunned the galaxy, but it was only the beginning. While other civilizations were still trying to comprehend what they had witnessed, Earth's fleets continued to move with silent precision, entering systems that had long been written off as lost. Humans were not reckless. They understood that rushing headlong into the heart of the Vorthkal territory could be dangerous, even for them. Every movement was calculated, every decision deliberate. But unlike others, humans were willing to take risks when the stakes were the lives of the innocent. The refugee systems had been the first to receive their help. And now, humans pushed further, toward areas no other species dared enter. Observers from nearby star clusters recorded everything. They noted the calmness of the human fleets, the way every ship seemed to know exactly what the others were doing, without the need for endless communication. There was no chaos, no confusion. Humans moved as one organism, a single mind stretched across hundreds of vessels. Other species could only watch in awe, realizing that coordination at this scale had never been seen before. As the human fleet approached a heavily fortified system, they encountered their first organized resistance. The Vorthkal had amassed a fleet larger than any human vessel had ever faced. Ships with jagged edges, bristling with weapons, prepared to ambush. Most species would have panicked or attempted negotiation. Humans did neither. They analyzed the formations, calculated trajectories, and identified weak points in the enemy's lines. Their weapon systems, unlike anything the galaxy had seen, allowed them to neutralize multiple targets without firing a traditional shot. The alien fleet did not understand what was happening. One by one, their ships simply disappeared from sensors, as if they had been erased. Despite the overwhelming power, humans were not acting blindly. They were careful to avoid unnecessary destruction. They ensured that any civilian vessels hidden among enemy lines were unharmed. Every strike had a purpose. Every maneuver was designed to stop the Vorthkal, not to destroy for pleasure. Observers across the galaxy were amazed by the balance between power and restraint. It was a combination that few thought possible in warfare. After the initial confrontation, humans began to move system by system, clearing out threats with a focus that seemed almost unnatural. They did not celebrate victories. They did not shout triumphs into the void. Instead, they simply continued their mission, moving on to the next system, the next group of people who needed help. Refugees who had once thought hope was gone now saw humans as saviors. They watched from escape pods and hidden stations as the alien fleets that had terrorized their lives were removed from the sky. And yet, the humans never lingered. Their purpose was not to conquer or rule. Their goal was protection, and once that was achieved, they moved on. The Vorthkal commanders, meanwhile, were struggling to understand. Their ships had been unmatched in the galaxy, feared by all who faced them. Yet here were humans, moving with a precision and calmness that defied every expectation. The alien leaders tried to reorganize, to counterattack, but nothing worked. Every move they made had already been anticipated. Human strategy seemed to operate on a level that no other species could predict. Their intelligence was fast, adaptable, and relentless. Was not just technology that gave humans their advantage. Observers began to notice something else. Humans had an instinct for protecting life that drove their decisions. Even when facing overwhelming force, they chose options that minimized harm to civilians. When ships were removed from the battlefield, they targeted only combat vessels, leaving infrastructure and safe zones intact whenever possible. This care was unusual in the galaxy. Most species fought with total disregard, considering destruction a normal part of war. Humans were different. They had empathy built into their strategy. They fought not to dominate, but to stop harm. News of human actions spread quickly. Transmissions reached systems that had been silent for decades. Beacons once dark with fear now sent messages of gratitude. Communities that had hidden in asteroids and space stations for generations began to emerge, witnessing humans as both protectors and a force unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The humanity of humans became part of their reputation. They were not just warriors. They were problem solvers, rescuers, and strategists all at once. The Vorthkal, realizing that conventional strategies could not overcome humans, tried to strike fear. They broadcasted threats, signaling that anyone who aligned with Earth would be destroyed. Most species would have panicked. Humans did not. They increased their vigilance, prepared defenses around refugee populations, and studied enemy behavior to predict the next move. There was no bravado, no empty threats. Humans acted with clarity and focus, their decisions always guided by the goal of ending conflict efficiently. Meanwhile, humans were also learning from the galaxy. They were observing species who had fought the Vorthkal for centuries, understanding tactics and strategies. But humans were not merely replicating what others did. They combined their knowledge with unique approaches, using technology, psychological insight, and careful planning. Their adaptability was unmatched. If the Vorthkal shifted tactics, humans shifted faster. If an ambush was laid, they had already predicted it. Every step was deliberate. Despite the power humans wielded, they never lost their humanity. They helped the wounded, rebuilt stations where possible, and shared supplies with those who had been trapped for years. These acts were small in comparison to their battles, but they created bonds that extended far beyond immediate survival. Civilizations that once feared humans now saw them as allies, friends, and protectors. And humans continued forward, undistracted, moving ever deeper into the war zone, knowing that the heart of the Vorthkal territory still waited. Even the observers in distant galaxies began to realize something important. Humans were not invincible in the sense that they were unstoppable machines. They could be hurt, they could fail, but they had something that no other species had demonstrated on this scale: a combination of patience, intelligence, strategy, and moral clarity. They understood the consequences of every action. They thought not just of victory, but of life, of fairness, and of ending suffering wherever they could. And the Vorthkal were learning a lesson they had never anticipated. They had faced powerful enemies before, but none had moved with such precision. None had acted with such focus. None had combined intellect and empathy in the way humans did. Their arrogance was being dismantled by a species they had dismissed for centuries. As humans continued their advance, they also began to understand the wider consequences of their actions. Systems that had been quiet observers of the Vorthkal's cruelty were now inspired. Some began to organize resistance, forming alliances and defenses where there had been none. Humans never asked for these actions, never directed them. They simply led by example, showing that strategy, courage, and care could defeat even the most terrifying enemy. The galaxy, which had once looked on in fear, now watched with a mixture of awe and hope. Humans had entered the war zone, not for conquest, not for glory, not for vengeance, but to protect life. And in doing so, they had begun a transformation. Entire civilizations started to believe that if humans could do it, then they could survive, rebuild, and resist tyranny themselves. At the center of the war zone, humans paused only briefly to assess their next move. There was no celebration, no arrogance. Every decision, every deployment, every tactical strike was considered in the context of a larger mission: stopping the Vorthkal, saving lives, and ending the cycle of fear. Humans had entered the war zone as outsiders, observers who had waited patiently. Now they were central players, guiding events with a combination of intelligence, morality, and courage that the galaxy had never seen before. Even in these moments of pause, humans were already thinking several steps ahead. They considered how to prevent future attacks, how to protect vulnerable populations, and how to maintain a balance between power and restraint. Other species, watching, struggled to comprehend this level of foresight. Many began to take notes, hoping to learn from humans, hoping to replicate their success, though none could match the instinctive skill and ethical clarity that humans demonstrated. And as the human fleet prepared to move into the HFY's next system, the message became clear to all who observed. Humans were not a species to be underestimated. They were not just fighters. They were protectors, strategists, and thinkers. They were capable of acts that could change the course of the galaxy. The Vorth Kal, who had believed themselves unstoppable, were beginning to understand that humanity was not simply another species to conquer. Humanity was a force that could not be ignored, and the galaxy would never view the universe the same way again. The humans were moving deeper into the Vorth Kal territory, and the galaxy could not look away. Their previous victories had already been astonishing, but now the true test began. The humans were about to face challenges the galaxy had long believed impossible. This was not just about defeating the Vorth Kal. This was about showing that strategy, intelligence, and human determination could overcome even the most advanced. Ruthless forces in the universe dot as the human fleet entered the next star system. They were met with a sight that had terrified even the bravest alien fleets. The system was heavily fortified, a network of massive ships, defensive satellites, and planetary weapons designed to stop any intruder. Most species would have fled at the sight of such an overwhelming defense. But humans did not. They slowed, scanned, and calculated. Every ship knew its place. Every command was precise. From the very beginning, humans approached the engagement differently. While other civilizations relied on brute force, humans relied on knowledge and observation. They did not fire blindly. They did not charge recklessly. Instead, they sent small, nimble vessels to gather detailed intelligence. These scouts moved through enemy formations without being detected. They recorded every weapon system, every patrol route, every weak point in the defense. And then the humans waited. The Vorth Kal noticed the scouts and assumed they were preparing for a traditional strike. They scrambled their ships, opening fire on what they thought were minor probes. But humans had expected this. Every action of the Vorth Kal was anticipated. And when the humans finally struck, it was with a precision that stunned all observers. The enemy ships did not explode in fire and smoke. They vanished as if reality itself had rejected them. Sensors could not detect debris, energy signatures, or wreckage. Entire squadrons disappeared without warning, leaving nothing behind. Observers from other civilizations watched in disbelief. They had seen humans move with strategy, yes, but they had not seen technology or skill capable of erasing entire fleets from reality. The humans were not destroying for destruction's sake. Their weapons targeted only those capable of causing harm. Civilians, transport ships, and even old, abandoned vessels were ignored. There was a sense of purpose in every action, a deliberate intention that others struggled to understand. Inside the human command ships, the atmosphere was calm. There was no shouting, no panic, no celebration. Humans moved with focus, communicating in short, clear signals. They relied on instinct and calculation. Every strike was measured, every maneuver deliberate. While the Vorth Kal scrambled to respond, humans were already preparing the next move, already thinking 5 steps ahead. It was as if the entire fleet acted as one mind, perfectly coordinated across vast distances. The Vorth Kal were beginning to panic. They had faced many species, many wars, but nothing had prepared them for humans. Their best commanders could not predict human movements. Their advanced technology, which had been feared across the galaxy, was failing against a species that combined intelligence, intuition, and moral clarity. And worst of all, humans were not acting recklessly. They were precise, efficient, and terrifyingly patient. Humans had learned from observing the galaxy for centuries. They understood how wars were fought, how civilizations collapsed, and how fear could control populations. But they did not simply copy these lessons. They adapted them to their own style, their own philosophy. They fought to protect, to end suffering, to prevent unnecessary destruction. And in doing so, they became a force that no one had anticipated. As the battle continued, humans demonstrated their ability to control entire environments. They manipulated the battlefield in ways other species had only theorized. They used gravitational fields to redirect enemy ships, creating traps and channels that forced the Vorthkal into positions where escape was impossible. They disabled weapons without firing directly at them, neutralizing threats without causing collateral damage. Observers were recording every tactic, realizing that humans were not only powerful, they were inventors, thinkers, and problem solvers in real time. The Vorthkal attempted to regroup. They sent their fastest ships to flank the humans, hoping to catch the fleet off guard. But humans had anticipated this. Smaller human vessels intercepted the flanking maneuvers, neutralizing the threat before it could reach the main fleet. Again, the enemy ships disappeared without a trace. The Vorthkal were losing more than territory. They were losing confidence. Every attack they attempted was met with an unexpected counter, every strategy undone before it could succeed. Humans also understood the importance of morale, both for themselves and for those they protected. Refugees and civilians, watching from hidden stations and transport ships, saw humans as protectors, not conquerors. They witnessed fleets moving with calm determination, saving those who had nowhere else to go. These acts, small by some standards, had a massive effect. The galaxy began to see humans as a species that could combine strength and compassion, a rare combination in the vast reaches of space. In the middle of the battle, humans made a move that would be remembered for generations. The Vorthkal had established a massive central command ship, a fortress bristling with defenses. Destroying it by conventional means would have taken months and caused countless casualties. But humans approached differently. They analyzed the ship, predicted its movements, and identified vulnerabilities that others could not see. Using a combination of tactical strikes, gravitational manipulation, and reality-altering technology, the command ship disappeared from sensors. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply removed from existence. The effect on the Vorthkal was immediate. Their leadership was gone. Their fleets were confused. They had no idea how the humans had achieved this. Panic spread through their ranks. The humans did not chase out of vengeance. They moved to secure the area, evacuate civilians, and ensure no further harm could come to those under threat. The precision and clarity of purpose were staggering. Observers across the galaxy began to realize something profound. Humans were not acting like other species. They were not motivated by fear, pride, or hunger for conquest. They were motivated by principle, by a desire to protect life, by the understanding that power could be wielded with responsibility. Other species had never seen such a combination. They had studied wars for thousands of years. Yet humans were rewriting what it meant to fight effectively. As the human fleet advanced further, the Vorthkal tried one last desperate move. They concentrated all remaining forces into a single massive ambush. Most civilizations would have panicked, but humans did not. They had already predicted such a move. Smaller human units moved ahead to create diversion channels. Larger ships positioned themselves to neutralize threats without unnecessary destruction. When the Vorthkal attacked, the ambush failed entirely. Ships vanished. Weapons were disabled. Leadership disappeared. And all the while, humans maintained focus, calm, and purpose. By the end of this engagement, the Vorthkal had suffered more than just loss of ships. They had lost control. They had underestimated humans at every turn. They had assumed that humans, who had remained quiet observers for so long, were inexperienced or weak. The galaxy had witnessed their error. Humans had entered the heart of enemy territory, neutralized the strongest defenses, and done so without unnecessary cruelty. Civilizations across the galaxy began to send cautious messages of admiration and hope. Beacons long dormant began transmitting gratitude. Refugees who had survived the Vorthkal's reign saw humans as more than warriors. They were saviors. And humans, as always, remained focused. They did not celebrate. They did not boast. They prepared for the next challenge, knowing that the war was not over, but confident that, step by step, they could restore peace to the regions most affected. Even the Vorthkal realized that conventional warfare could not stop humans. They began to fear, not just for their fleets, but for their survival as a species. Humans were not just opponents. They were a force unlike any the galaxy had known. Observers across systems understood that humans had changed the rules. They had shown that intelligence, empathy, strategy, and determination could be more powerful than any weapon or fleet dot, and as humans prepared to move on to the next system, one thing was clear: the galaxy had witnessed a new reality. Humans were not just participants in the war. They were shaping it. They were showing the universe what it meant to fight with skill, purpose, and heart. The Vorthkal, who had terrorized countless worlds, were learning too late that humanity was a species that could not be ignored. A species that had entered the Warzone not for glory, but for the protection of life itself. The humans were deeper in Vorthkal territory than any species had ever dared to go. Systems that had once been thought lost forever were now being observed, stabilized, and slowly brought back under control. Every fleet movement, every strike, every decision was precise, deliberate, and guided by one simple goal: protect life and stop the threat. The Vorthkal, who had long believed themselves untouchable, were beginning to understand that humans were not like any enemy they had faced before. As humans advanced, the Vorthkal tried to adapt. They gathered all remaining forces into heavily armed clusters, reinforced their defenses, and tried to strike with every weapon they had. From a distance, the galaxy's observers could see the aliens preparing for a massive counterattack. They expected humans to hesitate, to falter, or to be caught off guard. But humans were ready. They had anticipated that the Vorthkal would try to regroup. Every possible scenario had already been calculated. The first human move was subtle, almost invisible. Small, fast-moving scout vessels slipped past enemy lines, gathering intelligence, analyzing weapon systems, and identifying weaknesses. They moved with a patience and focus that stunned any observer. The Vorthkal fired, trying to intercept, but their attacks were already expected. One by one, their defenses began to crumble not through brute force, but through precision, strategy, and anticipation. Humans struck only where necessary, avoiding unnecessary destruction. The Vorthkal realized too late that humans were playing a different kind of game. Other species fought for conquest or survival, often with chaos and unpredictability. Humans fought with purpose, intelligence, and patience. Every move was planned, every reaction anticipated. Even when the Vorthkal tried a desperate flanking maneuver, humans had already positioned forces to intercept, neutralize, and protect civilians. By the time the enemy realized the trap, it was too late. Ships disappeared. Weapon systems failed. Leadership was gone. Observers across the galaxy were beginning to grasp the scope of humanity's strategy. Humans were not merely fighting battles. They were shaping the battlefield itself. Gravitational fields were manipulated to channel enemy ships. Communications were jammed selectively to disrupt coordination, and sensors predicted enemy movements before they could act. Every victory was measured, controlled, and precise. The humans did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They simply continued their mission, calm and methodical, their focus unbroken by the chaos around them. Even in the midst of war, humans were protecting those who could not defend themselves. Refugee ships, Trapped colonies and hidden stations were carefully monitored. Whenever possible, humans diverted their movements to ensure safety, offering guidance, protection, and support. Civilians began to see humans as more than just warriors. They were saviors, guardians, and problem-solvers. The Vorthkal commanders grew frantic. Their fleets were shrinking, their strategies failing, and their leadership disappearing without explanation. They had underestimated humans at every turn. Every plan they created was countered almost before it began. Every maneuver they attempted had already been anticipated. Panic spread among their ranks. Some ships tried to retreat, only to vanish from sensors as the humans continued to neutralize threats. Others attempted desperate counterattacks, only to be disabled or removed with surgical precision. Humans, however, never lost their focus. They understood the value of patience, the importance of every decision, and the impact of every strike. They acted with a sense of responsibility that no other species had demonstrated in this type of war. They fought not for glory, not for revenge, and not for domination, but for the protection of life and the restoration of peace to the galaxy. As the humans pressed deeper into the heart of Vorthkal territory, they encountered the Central Command Cluster, a massive assembly of warships, defensive satellites, and energy shields, designed to be impenetrable. Most civilizations would have hesitated, fearful of overwhelming firepower. Humans, however, approached with the same calm determination they had shown from the very beginning. They did not rush. They did not attack blindly. They studied, observed, and prepared. The first move was subtle. Humans deployed small, fast drones equipped with advanced sensors and cloaking systems. These drones slipped past defenses, gathering information on weapon systems, fleet formations, and energy fields. They moved so silently and efficiently that the Vorthkal did not even notice. Meanwhile, human fleets took positions in space that maximized efficiency and minimized risk, ensuring that the civilians and refugees in the system remained untouched. When humans finally acted, it was almost unreal. They did not launch a traditional assault. Instead, they used precision strikes combined with reality-altering technology. Enemy ships, including the Central Command vessels, vanished as if they had never existed. Observers across the galaxy could hardly believe what they were seeing. No debris, no explosions, no radiation, only the sudden absence of the enemy. The Vorthkal were left stunned, their command structure destroyed, their fleets in chaos. The effect on the galaxy was profound. For centuries, species had feared the Vorthkal. They had watched entire civilizations destroyed without mercy. And now they were witnessing humans, a species once underestimated, neutralize the enemy with unmatched skill and precision. Humans were not only capable of stopping a threat, they were capable of rewriting what it meant to fight effectively in space. Despite the power they wielded, humans remained focused on responsibility. They did not pursue destruction beyond what was necessary to end the threat. They carefully evacuated civilians, stabilized systems, and helped repair damage whenever possible. They acted with empathy, protecting those who could not protect themselves, showing that power without care was meaningless. Meanwhile, the Vorthkal were forced into full retreat. Their ships were destroyed or removed faster than they could respond. Commanders were missing, communication lines severed, and morale shattered. The humans had proven that brute force alone could not win a war. Strategy, intelligence, patience, and responsibility were far more effective. The galaxy was taking notes. Civilizations that had once feared humanity now saw them as a model of efficiency, compassion, and strength. Humans had demonstrated that it was possible to fight a war without losing humanity. Even in the heat of battle, they acted with moral clarity and strategic foresight. Other species could observe, analyze, and attempt to replicate these methods. but none could match the instinctive combination of intelligence, ethics, and courage that humans displayed. As the human fleet prepared to leave the system, their work was far from complete. There were still regions under threat, still civilians in danger, and still Vorthkal forces scattered across the territory. But humans had shown what was possible. They had demonstrated that a single species, acting with purpose, could challenge an empire of terror and begin to restore balance to the galaxy. For the Vorthkal, this was a turning point. They had assumed they were untouchable, that no species could outmatch their fleets or tactics. They had been wrong. Humanity had entered their territory not with chaos, not with hatred, but with calm, relentless focus. And the result was devastating. Their power had been broken, their confidence shattered, and their future uncertain. Across the galaxy, the impact was felt immediately. Civilizations that had long suffered in silence began to rebuild, inspired by the humans' actions. Refugees returned cautiously to systems once under siege, knowing that humans had changed the rules of engagement forever. And for humans, the mission continued. There was no time to celebrate, no need for recognition. The work was not done. There were still lives to protect, systems to stabilize, and threats to neutralize. But one thing was certain. The humans had proven themselves. They had entered the Warzone, faced the heart of enemy territory, and emerged not only victorious, but responsible. They had shown the galaxy that power, intelligence, and strategy could be combined with compassion, that wars could be won without losing one's humanity. The Vorthkal, once feared across countless systems, now faced a species that could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast them at every turn. And as humans moved to the next system, the message became clear to everyone watching. Humanity was not just another species in the galaxy. Humanity was a force of precision, morality, and unparalleled skill. They had entered the Warzone, and the enemy was beginning to understand that there was no escaping the consequences of underestimating them. The humans had advanced deeper than anyone had thought possible. Entire Vorthkal systems that had been feared for generations were now under observation, stabilized, and carefully cleared of threats. Their strategy was methodical. Their technology was precise. And their focus on protecting life had not wavered, even in the midst of what most species would call the heart of enemy territory. The Vorthkal, cornered and desperate, were beginning to realize the true scale of human capability. Their strongest fleets had been neutralized. Their command structures were gone. Their attempts at regrouping had failed. Panic rippled through their forces. Ships that had once been confident and aggressive now moved hesitantly, unsure where safety could be found. Humans, as always, observed before they acted. Every movement was calculated. Every strike was deliberate. They did not rush recklessly into the enemy. They did not fire blindly. Instead, they analyzed, predicted, and acted with precision that even the most experienced alien commanders could not comprehend. The Vorthkal had learned to fear human strategy. Their power alone could not overcome it. As the humans entered the final cluster of Vorthkal systems, the stakes were higher than ever. These systems were heavily fortified. Every planet, every station, every fleet was prepared to resist with everything the Vorthkal had left. Most species would have hesitated, imagining the cost and risk of moving forward. But humans did not hesitate. They advanced with a calm resolve, fully aware of the danger, fully confident in their ability to achieve their mission. Before the first strike, humans deployed specialized vessels to map the entire battlefield. They identified every enemy weapon, every patrol route, every potential escape route. The Vorthkal tried to hide, to reposition, to lay traps. Humans anticipated each move, adjusting their strategy in real time. Every calculation was accurate. Every response was efficient. The Vorthkal realized too late that they were facing a force that thought faster, acted faster and adapted faster than any enemy they had ever encountered. When humans acted, the results were immediate. Enemy fleets began to vanish. Weapons systems were neutralized without causing unnecessary damage to surrounding areas. Civilians trapped in the conflict zones were guided to safety. Observers across the galaxy could hardly believe what they were witnessing. These were not reckless attacks or destructive explosions. Humans were precise, surgical, and careful, showing that it was possible to neutralize threats without leaving chaos in their wake. The Vorth Kal made one last attempt at resistance. They concentrated their remaining forces into a massive defensive formation around their central command hub. It was a fortress that had been built to withstand centuries of attacks. Most species would have considered it invincible, but humans approached it with the same clarity they had applied throughout the campaign. They studied the formation, predicted the behavior of each ship, and identified vulnerabilities invisible to other species. Then humans struck, and what happened stunned the galaxy. The central command hub, along with all surrounding vessels, disappeared from sensors. There were no explosions, no debris, no radiation. The Vorth Kal ships were simply gone. Observers could not understand the method, only the result. The humans had removed the enemy's command structure entirely. Leadership was gone. Coordination collapsed. Panic spread among the remaining forces. Despite the overwhelming success, humans did not celebrate. They did not broadcast victory messages or flaunt their power. Instead, they focused on stabilizing the systems, evacuating civilians, and securing resources for those who had been trapped under Vorth Kal control for decades. This careful approach reinforced the image of humans, not just as warriors, but as protectors, as beings who fought not for glory, but to preserve life. The remaining Vorth Kal ships tried to scatter, hoping to escape the humans' reach. But humans had anticipated this. Fleets were positioned to intercept any escape routes. Smaller ships acted as scouts, tracking movements with precision. Larger vessels prepared to neutralize threats as soon as they emerged. Every maneuver of the Vorth Kal was met with a counter. Every attempt at evasion was predicted. By the time the enemy realized what was happening, most of their remaining forces had been removed from the battlefield without further casualties. Observers from other civilizations marveled at the humans' efficiency. They had never seen a species combine strategy, intelligence, and empathy so seamlessly. Humans had shown that it was possible to fight a war without losing one's humanity. Even in the midst of destruction, they acted with care, precision, and foresight. Their technology was advanced, yes, but it was guided by intelligence and ethics. That combination made them unique in the galaxy. Meanwhile, refugees and civilians began to emerge from hiding. They had witnessed humans entering the war zone, neutralizing the enemy, and acting with restraint. Their fears slowly transformed into hope. Systems that had been abandoned or destroyed were now being stabilized. Supplies were delivered, transport ships guided to safety, and safe zones established. The presence of humans inspired not only those they directly protected, but neighboring civilizations as well. For the Vorth Kal, this was a moment of reckoning. They had once ruled entire regions with fear and aggression. Now, they faced a species that was capable of dismantling their power without unnecessary cruelty. They had underestimated humanity. They had assumed silence and observation equaled weakness. They had been wrong. Every miscalculation, every overconfidence, every assumption of superiority had been proven false. Humans, however, were not acting out of vengeance or pride. Their focus remained on the mission: neutralize the threat, protect life, and restore order. They coordinated movements across the remaining systems, ensuring that every area was secured before moving on. Civilians and refugees were always a priority. Every strike, every maneuver, every deployment was guided by this principle. the galaxy began to recognize that humans were not just effective fighters. They were leaders in thought, strategy, and moral clarity. Other species began to study human tactics, hoping to learn from their approach. Humans had shown that it was possible to act decisively in war without abandoning ethics. They had redefined what it meant to engage in conflict at a galactic scale. As humans moved to the final stages of the operation, the remaining Vorthkal forces were scattered and leaderless. Their technology, once feared across the stars, could not match human ingenuity. Observers noted the final engagements, where humans carefully neutralized remaining pockets of resistance. Ships disappeared, weapon systems were disabled, and life-threatening situations were avoided whenever possible. The humans were methodical, patient, and relentless. Finally, the last major concentration of enemy forces was addressed. Humans created a controlled field around the remaining Vorthkal cluster. It was not a weapon of destruction, but a means of containment, ensuring that no further harm could be done to surrounding systems. The Vorthkal were removed from positions of power, not out of hatred, but out of necessity. Life across multiple systems was protected, and the threat was effectively neutralized. The galaxy watched as humans completed this final stage. It was not just a victory over an enemy. It was a demonstration of what a species could achieve when intelligence, empathy, and strategy were combined. Humans had entered the Warzone not for glory or revenge, but to protect life, and in doing so, they had rewritten the rules of engagement for the entire galaxy. Civilians began to rebuild. Systems that had been abandoned or terrorized for centuries slowly returned to life. Refugees were able to reclaim their homes, restart trade, and begin repairing the damage that the Vorthkal had inflicted. And humans, having completed their mission in this cluster, began preparing for further stabilizations, knowing that the galaxy's recovery would require patience, guidance, and continued care. The Vorthkal, meanwhile, had no choice but to retreat completely. They had faced a species that outmaneuvered, and outlasted them at every step. Their empire, once feared, was shattered. Leadership gone, fleets removed, and morale destroyed. They could only attempt to regroup far from the humans' reach. And even then, the lesson was clear. Humanity was a force unlike any other. Underestimating humans was no longer an option. For humanity, the work was not about conquest. It was about responsibility. They had entered the war zone, neutralized the enemy, and protected countless lives. They had done so without unnecessary destruction. They had demonstrated the power of intelligence, strategy, and empathy combined. And as they prepared to leave the region, they did so with calm determination, knowing that the galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. The humans' actions in this stage of the war zone would be remembered for generations, not just as a demonstration of military power, but as an example of how strength can be paired with responsibility, how strategy can coexist with compassion, and how a species can rise to protect life even in the most dangerous and chaotic situations. And as they moved toward the final cluster of systems still under threat, one thing was clear. Humanity had become a force the galaxy could not ignore, a species capable of facing overwhelming odds with intelligence, courage, and heart, in achieving results that others could only imagine. The humans had reached the last strongholds of the Vorthkal. Every system they entered had been studied, every fleet mapped, every threat anticipated. The galaxy had been watching in awe as humans moved with precision, patience, and unwavering focus. What had begun as a mission to protect life had become a demonstration of strategy, intelligence, and humanity itself. The final cluster of Vorthkal systems was heavily defended. It was a maze of ships, stations, and energy barriers designed to stop any intruder. Most species would have turned away in fear, but humans did not. They paused only briefly, scanning the area, analyzing every detail and identifying weaknesses invisible to any other civilization. Their movements were calm and deliberate, almost like a single organism thinking, planning, and acting as one. Humans began by sending advanced reconnaissance drones into the cluster. These drones were fast, stealthy, and precise, slipping through barriers and defenses without detection. They mapped every weapon system, fleet position, and command post. The Vorthkal scrambled, attempting to detect the intruders, but humans had anticipated every step. The enemy ships were neutralized before they could react, sometimes disappearing entirely from sensors, leaving only empty space behind. What made humans different from other species was their combination of intelligence and ethics. They were not acting out of hatred or vengeance. They were not seeking glory or conquest. Every move was guided by the principle of protecting life. Civilian vessels were spared. Planets and stations were preserved whenever possible. Refugees and hidden colonies were carefully monitored and guided to safety. Humans had shown the galaxy that it was possible to fight and win without becoming monsters themselves. The Vorthkal tried one last desperate move. They concentrated all remaining forces into a massive central formation around their command hub. They fired everything they had, hoping to overwhelm the humans with brute force. But humans had already predicted this. Fleets moved into strategic positions. Channels were created to redirect enemy movements, and smaller ships intercepted the flanking maneuvers. Every action of the Vorthkal was anticipated, every strategy countered before it could succeed. Then humans struck, and the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The central command hub and all surrounding fleets disappeared from existence. There were no explosions, no debris, no radiation. Enemy vessels simply vanished, leaving nothing behind. The Vorthkal command structure was gone, their fleets disabled, and their leadership eradicated. Panic spread among the remaining forces. Ships fled, but there were few places left to hide. Humans had removed the last major threats with unmatched precision. Despite the overwhelming power they wielded, humans remained calm. They did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They focused on securing the region, ensuring that civilians were safe, and stabilizing planets that had long suffered under Vorthkal control. The humans were not conquerors. They were protectors, guardians who had proven that strength could coexist with responsibility. The galaxy was silent in awe. Observers from distant civilizations had never seen anything like this. Entire fleets, capable of destroying worlds, had been removed from reality without unnecessary destruction. The humans had combined intelligence, strategy, and compassion in a way no one thought possible. The Vorthkal, once feared across countless systems, had been neutralized completely. Refugees and survivors began to emerge from hiding. For decades, they had lived in fear, watching their homes destroyed, their families scattered, and their lives stolen. Now, they saw humans moving calmly through the systems, restoring order, evacuating the vulnerable, and guiding those who had been lost. Hope, long dormant, began to bloom once again. Even the remaining Vorthkal forces were helpless. Leadership was gone, fleets scattered, and morale shattered. They had underestimated humans at every turn. Their arrogance and assumption that humans were weak or passive had been proven fatally wrong. Humanity had entered the Warzone, not for glory, not for conquest, but for the protection of life. And in doing so, they had removed the enemy completely from reality. The final systems were secured systematically. Humans moved slowly and deliberately, ensuring that no threat remained, no civilian was left behind, and no collateral damage occurred. They acted with the kind of patience and precision that seemed almost impossible in the chaos of war. Observers could only watch in astonishment. Humans had not only defeated the Vorthkal, they had done so in a way that demonstrated intelligence, restraint, and empathy at a scale the galaxy had never witnessed Civilizations across nearby star systems began to rebuild. Trade routes reopened. Stations and colonies were stabilized. Refugees returned cautiously, guided by humans who continued to prioritize safety and care. Humans had shown that power did not need to be destructive, that intelligence did not require cruelty, and that strength could coexist with morality. Meanwhile, the Vorthkal, now scattered and leaderless, had no choice but to retreat far from human-controlled space. Their empire, once feared, was broken. Ships that had terrorized civilizations for centuries were gone. Systems that had been held in fear were now safe. And the lesson was clear. Humanity was not a species to underestimate. They were not just observers, not just participants. They were a force of precision, ethics, and strategy that had rewritten what it meant to dominate the battlefield. For humans, the mission was never about conquest. It was about responsibility. They had entered the war zone, neutralized the threat, protected countless lives, and restored stability to the galaxy. Their work was guided by intelligence, patience, and moral clarity. They had demonstrated that it was possible to win wars without becoming monsters, to wield immense power without cruelty, and to lead with both strategy and empathy. As humans prepared to leave the Vorthkal territory, the galaxy took note. This was not just a victory. It was a transformation. Civilizations that had long suffered under fear began to rebuild, inspired by the humans' actions. Other species studied human tactics, hoping to learn from the combination of precision, intelligence, and responsibility. And even the remaining Vorthkal, if they survived at all, would never forget the force they had faced. Humans had changed the rules of engagement in the galaxy. They had entered the war zone calmly, observed with patience, and acted decisively. They had removed the enemy completely from reality while minimizing harm to innocents. They had shown that strength without ethics was incomplete, that intelligence without empathy was dangerous, and that a species could rise to protect life on a galactic scale. The final moments of the campaign were quiet but powerful. Human fleets moved through the last systems, ensuring that every threat was neutralized, every civilian was safe, and every planet could begin to recover. There was no celebration, no pomp, no broadcast of triumph. Humans acted with humility and focus, letting the results speak for themselves. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. A species once underestimated had not only entered the war zone, but had also removed the enemy completely from reality. They had restored hope, protected life, and demonstrated that strength and morality could coexist. Civilizations across the stars would tell the story for generations. And as humans left the region, the message was clear. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do. They were not just fighters. They were protectors, strategists, and thinkers. They were capable of facing overwhelming odds, neutralizing the deadliest threats, and doing so without abandoning their sense of responsibility. They had entered the war zone, and the enemy was gone. The galaxy would never be the same.